This is 69X Minutes, presented by Mario Nafal. I'm Erin Molan. Thanks so much for joining us. It's great to have your company. This week, massive, absolute mayhem in global markets. Trump's tariffs slammed the planet like a wrecking ball. Stocks crashed, currencies spun out. And world leaders, well, did they hit the panic button? Absolutely. Then he hit pause. And order was restored somewhat. More on that. We've got the full spread, not just the economic carnage, but everything else blowing up behind the scenes. Just the biggest headlines, the boldest investigations, and the wildest stories straight from the X-trenches, just as you love it. It's real news, it's real fast. Let's get into it. Tonight, a Chinese-owned company operating inside US military bases. A congressman from North Carolina says it's not just your multivitamins at stake. We'll explain more soon. He's sounding the alarm on surveillance, loopholes, and what China might already know about US troops. For over a decade, Hungary has led the Western Front in battling the global birth rate decline. Now, they've actually reversed it through bold, unapologetic policies. And their latest one is even bigger. No tax for mums. I'll take that. In Egypt, a female activist called out Hamas. Now her own country wants her silenced. She's on the run, speaking on truth, terror, and her unwavering love of her nation, despite its attempts to destroy her. And in an unprecedented move, Poland has shut down its largest conservative TV station, an alarming new escalation in Europe's war on free speech. Trump's new tariff plan has the world watching. Is it economic warfare or a genius strategy? The stage is set. It's Debate Club entrepreneur Gary Cardone squares off against economist Dr. Charles Steele in our sneak peek of this amazing new show. You don't want to miss it. Plus, in my take, why the current focus on China off the back of the tariffs will save millions of lives and trillions of dollars by helping to avoid an almost inevitable war. I'm Erin Molan. You are watching Mario Nafal's 69X Minutes. Is China spying on US troops from inside their bases? Rep Pat Harrigan, a US Army veteran, says yes. A Chinese-owned company is quietly running GNC vitamin stores on American military installations. This is about data access, federal loopholes, and a possible national security breakdown. So let's see what's really going on.
I don't think that there's any disagreement right now that China is the single largest, most important strategic threat in our near and midterm future. Someone told us, kind of gave us a tip, that GNC was selling a lot of their product that actually originated in China. The manufacturing is done in China. And as my team began to investigate that, we actually discovered that GNC was wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party. And so very quickly, our investigation went from what are they selling to who are they owned by, and how on earth could we possibly have a company that's owned by the Chinese Communist Party operating 83 different retail locations on our military bases, some of our most sensitive military bases across the country. Anytime that one of our adversaries has access and placement on one of our military bases, that is concerning in and of itself. But when it's actually dedicated to servicing our military men and women, that's even more concerning, because there's so many different pieces of information that as a service member interacts with a company that is selling supplements, that service member divulges, whether intentionally, unintentionally. It really makes for a very ripe intelligence target with respect to shaping a target, what a foreign adversary's intelligence base would do. And so for that reason, and just the reason of common sense, it just doesn't make sense. And I think at this point, we're just, what do we do about this? This has just got to stop. And we immediately just shifted our focus and went straight for a bill that would kick GNC off of our military installations. GNC came onto our military bases as an American company. That's what's really important here. They were 100% owned by Americans. And then in 2018, after they had created their footprint on our military installations, They sold 40% of their company to a firm called Harrigan Pharmaceuticals, which is wholly owned by the Chinese Communist Party. In 2020, GNC actually went bankrupt, and through that process, Harrigan Pharmaceuticals, through a subsidiary of theirs, purchased the other 60% of GNC, at that point in time wholly owning GNC, making GNC a wholly owned company of the Chinese Communist Party, and assuming its retail locations on our military bases, 83 different retail locations. And so because of the nature and the graduated shift of the company's ownership from American ownership to Chinese Communist Party ownership, it actually just flew under the radar. There was no oversight with respect to, the who, what, when, why, where of how this happened, should it be happening, and what are the implications for our men and women in uniform. And we are now stepping in, having found out about this, providing that oversight and saying, this should not happen. We have a free country. You can sell to whoever you want to sell your company to, but if you sell to the Chinese Communist Party, you should have no expectation that you should be able to operate on our military bases. So we don't have a ton of clarity on GNC's actual processes and procedures of what they have access to or what they communicate and to who they communicate. I think the important thing is that they absolutely have access and placement on our military bases with direct proximity to our military personnel. And I think that we all know generally how these supplement stores operate, right? They have a broad range of supplements that deal with a broad range of health and performance and even, health and safety issues, right? This company does end up knowing a lot of information, private and personal health information of our individual service members. And for instance, they could very easily know whether our service members are, seeking a therapy for low testosterone or any other number of maladies that they're trying to solve over the counter. They could understand based on purchasing habits, deployment cycles, potentially based on different sales arrangements, who belongs to what unit. I mean, there really is no shortage of information they could get. And that's even notwithstanding, geofencing, any type of other electronic exploitation that could possibly happen. And to be clear, we don't have evidence that has happened. I think that we just understand that the risk is just not worth it. We've got to put a stop to this. If you're going to be operating on an American installation, you should certainly be owned by an American company.
Snow White continues to suffer from backlash as it struggles at the box office. The Disney live-action remake of the classic film took just $1.5 million across the US on Friday, April 4th, and has only taken $77 million domestically in the United States. It comes amid fan boycotts and calls to boycott the film over Rachel Zegler's previous woke outbursts, and cinema goers are also leaving bad negative reviews across ratings platforms. On IMDb alone, the film received a staggeringly low rating of 1.6 out of 10 out of 325,000 user ratings. Disney has now scaled back public appearances and interviews from the film's main star, Rachel Zegler, to try and avoid alienating customers and consumers of Disney products. Disney is now also going to be scaling back and pausing the live-action remake of Tangled while it grapples with the fallout from its latest film and tries to salvage its reputation, which has been severely damaged in the wake of the Snow White release. This is Ollie London, and this was your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Michał Cotler-Wunsh isn't sounding the alarm, she's throwing the hammer down. Free speech is being hijacked, human rights are being twisted into weapons, and anti-Semitism, well, it's mutating, mainstreaming, and marching across the campuses, courtrooms, and city streets. She calls this an existential moment for Israel, for Jews, and for any democracy that still values liberty and truth. This isn't about left versus right, it's about right and wrong.
The hijacking and weaponization, if you will, of the most cherished freedoms of democracies, free speech included, has actually been systematically normalized in many, many ways in academic spaces and in social media spaces. And of course, none of that stays in those spaces. It all translates to what we see on the streets. In that sense, my looking glass, if you will, is the understanding that any policy, any rule, any principle has to be applied equally and consistently. The moment that there is a selective application of any rule, of any principle, of any law, then it isn't worth the paper that it's written on. That's true in all of the contexts that I mentioned. Not allowing selective application of policies, of rules, of guidelines is the only way to ensure that this covenant, if you will, that the law represents, whether it's free speech or other basic freedoms that we have come to take for granted in democracies, will not be undermined. And most critically, we have to be aware, freedom was never free. The understanding that freedom is something that we need not only to cherish, but to recognize how it is that we ensure that it is upheld and promoted and protected equally and consistently is the intersection that we're at the moment. If you ask me, it is an existential moment, not just for the state of Israel, the nation state of the Jewish people, under existential attack, not just for Jews around the world that in response have suffered a tsunami of anti-Semitism, but also for the foundations of all of our democracies. I would even venture say, for all societies who cherish life and liberty. We are at an existential moment for all of that. The strengths of democracies can easily be utilized as weaknesses to collapse the foundations of democracies from within. And that's the moment that we are in. That's what we're seeing play out. A lethal, ancient, ever-mutating hate that has existed for as long as the Jewish people ourselves have existed, for thousands of years, and has mutated over time by latching onto the guiding social construct of each time: religion, science, and the secular religion of our times, human rights, connects directly to the understanding of free speech as well. That is the way that anti-Semitism mutates, permeates, spreads, creating, if you will, new viral strains that, when spread and mainstreamed, actually unleash what, historically speaking, for the thousands of years of its existence, have been the most reliable sign of a major threat to humanity and freedom and the dignity of difference. In the understanding that anti-Semitism did not die in Auschwitz, it just mutated, has come full circle in the post-October 7 and multi-front war that it launched on the State of Israel. Look, the post-World War II international rules-based order that was created on the ashes of the Holocaust to ensure the pledge of never again to anyone. That international rules-based order that created the mechanisms for the countries that committed to that pledge of never again, based on the international rules-based order, including the institutions that were founded, the UN, agencies like UNRWA, mechanisms that would hold them to account, like the International Court of Justice, like the International Criminal Court, intended to be courts of last resort. The understanding that if those institutions, mechanisms, agencies, principles are hijacked and weaponized, for whatever purpose, by the way, in this case, to demonize, delegitimize, and apply double standards to the state of Israel, the Jew among the nations, if that happens, that's not just a problem for the Jew among the nations, the state of Israel, to which Jews, a prototypical indigenous people that speaks the same language Hebrew, that traverses the same land Israel, that reads the same book, the Bible, that practices the same customs and rituals for thousands of years, that's literally the meaning of the word indigeneity, too hijacked and weaponized against the state of Israel. The understanding is that it's not just a problem for that Jewish nation state to which we returned after thousands of years of exile and persecution. No. And it's not just a problem for Jews around the world, and actually with this strain of anti-Semitism, as I'll try to convey, for Zionists around the world, because you need not be a Jew to be the target of this strain of anti-Semitism that is anti-Zionism, the denial of Israel's right to exist. You need just believe in Israel's right to exist, to be the target of this strain of what is an ever-mutating hate. It's not just a problem for us, not the Jewish nation state, not those of us that believe in her right to exist. It is, in fact, a problem for all of those that understand the imperative for that international rules-based order post-World War II, for it to be upheld equally and consistently in order to be able to uphold and protect the pledge of never again. I mean, we're meeting now at an intersection where there actually are real genocides ongoing in Sudan, in Syria, and the international institutions entrusted to uphold, promote, and protect are silent on some and appropriating those mechanisms on others. That is where we begin our story.
Can someone explain to me how standing up to terrorism has become more controversial than the terrorism itself? Egyptian analyst Dalia Ziada condemns Hamas openly, clearly, bravely. And Egypt's response? Well, to smear her in the press, threaten her family, try to strip her citizenship. Imagine loving your country enough to risk everything for it and being punished for exactly that. I want to go through the list of crimes that you have committed, and you add any in if you need to. You condemned Hamas after the horrors of October 7. You supported the victims of that horrific terrorist attack, exactly the same as I did. You then posted a photo showing peace in the Middle East between different religions, different backgrounds, different nationalities, saying this is what you hope for.
Actually, the biggest crime perhaps I committed is that I believe that Israel is not our enemy. And our real enemy are the radical Islamist organizations ranging from the Iran-sponsored militia up to Hamas, the Islamic Jihad, and all these other groups that are hiding under the banner of fighting against Israel or the Jews, while actually they are also not only fighting against Israel or the Jews, they are also hurting Arabs and Muslims and everyone on earth. When Hamas attacks civilians in their homes and kill them, torture them, kidnaps some of them, it's normal, it's natural that you condemn the terrorist organization Hamas, not the victims. What happened, unfortunately, in my part of the world, the Arab world, was that people condemned Israel rather than condemning the terrorist organization Hamas, and they were celebrating what Hamas did. So I knew if I speak up against Hamas at that time, yes, it will come with consequences, but I didn't expect the consequences will be that big. I appeared in an Arab-speaking media, and I condemned Hamas, and I said Israel has the right to defend itself, and so it immediately stirred a terrible backlash against me. Started first by death threats coming to my phone, the usual thing on social media, like, insults and so. And then it quickly escalated when the Egyptian state-sponsored media picked up on the issue and started to speak about it and put my image even on the screen and calling me a Zionist spy and having members of parliament from Egypt making phone calls to these media outlets to attack me for days. It went very bad when this radical Islamist group, they decided to go to my family house and look for me. They literally were asking for me to punish me for not being a good Muslim because I condemned Hamas. So I immediately, thank God I was not there that night, and my mother met with them. She called me and I was in my apartment in another neighborhood. I immediately contacted the security authorities thinking that, okay, they will definitely protect me. And I spoke to a senior officer who could really protect me. But unfortunately, he was very cold and he said to me, we have nothing to do with you anymore. You go face your fate. And I told him, why? Aren't you also against Hamas? Because Egypt is already, against Hamas. Hamas infiltrated into Sinai, killed our soldiers, our people. So he said, this is not the question. The question is that you said that you support Israel. So for him, My crime was that I said I support Israel's right to defend itself. For the Islamists, my crime was that I condemned Hamas. At that moment, I knew it's not going to end up well. And the next morning, just overnight, it was literally, Erin, the scariest night of my life. I can tell you, I had to turn off the lights in my apartment so nobody knows that I am inside. And I stayed in the dark all night. I woke up to the news that 4 legal claims were filed against me at the Attorney General's office, accusing me of all sorts of things. At that moment, I knew I had to leave very quickly. I was very, very, very lucky that I had great friends because of my work on Muslim-Jewish dialogue and Arab-Israeli dialogue for so long from before. They made a team that was miraculously able to get me out of Egypt in 5 hours. It has been 17 months now since I had to leave Egypt following the October 7 attack. I had to run for my life then. I have not seen my family all this time. They're scared most of the time. They are falling under terrible social shaming. I cannot understand why they see me so much as a threat. Is just saying that I want peace is a threat. Now they are trying to strip me of the thing I embraced my whole life as my identity. And this is not fair. This is not fair. And for what? I'm not a terrorist. I'm not a criminal. I did not do anything wrong. Why they want to do this to me? Just to silence me, just to stop me from speaking up the truth? I worked in the United States also with an organization here for about 7 years or so. I had every opportunity in my life before to leave Egypt and just live happy in any other country, including in the US. But I've always chosen Egypt. And honestly, I will keep fighting anywhere I am. I will keep saying what I'm saying. And I want them to know they don't have the power to take my Egyptian identity from me. I am as Egyptian as the Nile and as the pyramid. And let them say whatever they say, sign whatever papers they want to sign. Let them give themselves the illusion that they have this control over me, but they will never be able to take me from me.
This is David Agape. On Sunday, Avenida Paulista, the main avenue in São Paulo, was filled with thousands of Bolsonaro supporters. Families, children, and elderly people gathered to demand amnesty for the January 8 prisoners. Just like January 6th in the US, January 8th in Brazil was a protest against the election results, which many believe were manipulated to favor Lula. During the event, thousands of people entered government buildings in Brasilia. Most were elderly and unarmed, yet they were accused of attempting a coup. Many received harsher sentences than violent criminals. Others remain in jail without a trial. Deborah, a hairdresser and mother of 2, was arrested for writing "You Lost Man" on a statue using a lipstick. Deborah and her lipstick became the symbol of Sunday's protest. In his speech, Bolsonaro asked for amnesty not for himself, but for the people unfairly imprisoned. And even without a public office, he gathered 7 state governors side by side. This is David Agape, and that was your 69 seconds and for 69 minutes.
The EU's war on free speech just hit new heights in Poland. TV Republica, the largest conservative news channel in the country, has been shut down. It's basically like their version of Fox News. The excuse? A licence technicality. But no one's buying it. This is just the latest move to silence right-wing voices in Europe. Michał Rachoń from TV Republica joins us now.
Just so I want to make sure I understand it, it's hard for me to even believe that it's happening, but TV Republica, the station that you guys have been building and recreating, is now you're facing the loss of the license that would permit you to operate in Poland.
What is going on right now? We've created a station that is right now, as we speak, the biggest news station in Poland, in one of the biggest European Union TV markets. We've created by our hands, by our knowledge, by the huge supported and crowdfunding effort of tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of people who every day donate money to support to build the station that we've created. And as the current government, the same government and the same people who pulled the plug and turned off not only TVP World but also TVP Info, the station that we created with our friends that are here right now in Telewizja Republika, they are trying to shut down the privately owned TV station that got nothing to do with the government. That is not. We got $0 of or zlotys or euros of the government funding. So we are fully independent, which is the reason for which the government is trying to shut us down under the false accusations that our broadcasting license was granted to us with some kind of breaks and the regulator, the Ofcom of Poland, did some kind of mistakes in the process of granting us the broadcasting license. It's important to know this station wasn't created last year or 1.5 years ago when Tusk government took over power. This station was created and was established by the group of conservative journalists in 2013. That was the first place I was working as a journalist, and we've built it a media TV powerhouse over the span of last 1.5 years. And the current government right now is trying to shut it down. Just for our viewers, the numbers that we are gaining here, the numbers that our ratings are so big that as we speak right now, which is the reason why I'm in a VR somewhere in the middle of Poland right now, because today our station is organizing the only debate, the first debate of all the presidential candidates in the upcoming presidential election. And we are doing it in the same moment where all the mainstream stations, privately owned by the big international companies like Warner Bros. and stuff like this, publicly owned TV station, and the biggest the TV organization right now in the same small city in the middle of Poland is doing another debate with the candidate of the ruling party, and we are having all the opposition candidates speaking on our debate right now. So this is the situation that we are facing right now,
because
and
people know that you guys
being shut down by the government right now
because they know you have an audience. And this is, there's a couple chilling, things. I mean, from what it looks like the story, I mean, it starts with one single judge saying, I think there's a problem, even though the station's been operating, as you said, since 2013. All of a sudden, there's a problem now. And we see, I'm talking to you from a country where, this is a big sort of story about Ukraine, or perception, where all of the main television stations have been controlled centrally. Now, that's because it's a war, for one. But an important thing to note, no one watches TV, I mean, here in the same way. People get their media online, and so there's a lot of free speech. There's a lot of independent media here in Ukraine.
Here's the kicker.
But you guys are not in a war zone. And, it's interesting. Another thing is that I look, Donald Tusk, your prime minister, I wonder if he said anything about this, because you would think that he would be an advocate of free speech based on what he says or his principles. And moreover, one thing I've noticed, Michał, and I didn't think about it till today, really consciously, but when you were at TVP World and you had that TVP World had built up that huge audience on YouTube with the people in the heartland of America, that was that was really the best source for so many Americans of what was happening in Ukraine. And I mean, you guys stand with Ukraine because you stand for freedom of speech and free people against tyranny, and you were very clear about it, and that resonated with Americans. But then Donald Tusk's government shut that down, and his replacement version of TVP World, they don't do any good storytelling about Ukraine, and no one even watches it. It's not compelling, and so Tusk will go to these European meetings and say that he's such a hero for Ukraine, but he's actually shut down. And now it seems he's trying to shut down even further the best sources of information from Eastern Europe, from Central and Eastern Europe, to America.
Are Trump's tariffs economic genius or fiscal suicide? In one corner, Gary Cardone, entrepreneur, tariff backer, and Made in America believer. In the other, Dr. Charles Steele, Hillsdale economist, market purist, and protectionism critic. Catch it all on Debate Club, Wednesday 4:20 p.m. ET, only on X. Here's a preview.
This question is at the top of everyone's mind as we enter 2025. Will tariffs fuel inflation in 2025? With prices still high, are tariffs making life harder for everyday Americans, or are they part of a solution? And we'll start with you, Dr. Steele. Go ahead, please.
So I'm an economist, so I'm going to be very technically correct about this. I won't be technical. But inflation really is a monetary phenomenon. Tariffs might drive prices higher, but that's not really inflation. That's simply an increase in costs, not the same as inflation. But yes, across the board tariffs will, if they are imposed, and of course they're on hold right in the latest we've heard, tariffs will increase prices, and that does hurt consumers. Certainly in the short run it does. Now, the question maybe is, you also asked, will prices come down? And that's really a function of production. If we have more production, you could drive prices down, and more and better, more efficient production. And tariffs actually tend to block that. Now, I also mentioned that tariffs could be justified for defense reasons. The argument that a number of economists have made on this is that if you have a particular industry that's very important for national defense and you need to protect it, then tariffs could be a way to do that. But you have to remember that that's a cost of defense. Don't think of that as being an economic program that makes you better off. It doesn't make you wealthier. It's actually just a cost of defense. And the real danger is that everyone will begin to claim that if you do that, every industry will claim that it is a defense industry. One example, at one point the sugar producers were claiming that they were a defense industry and trying to justify the American sugar tariffs, sugar program, which is a set of tariff rate quotas, on the basis of national defense. And yet that doesn't make a great deal of sense, because sugar is not only not a defense industry, we have got a great substitute. We subsidize corn like crazy, and then we use corn syrup instead of sugar. Sugar is probably 2 to 3 times as expensive in the United States as the world prices, and it just benefits a few people to have that kind of protectionism. So again, I think that it may be necessary for the United States to put some real tariffs on China simply as a defense measure. That's going to inflict some pain on consumers, so it should be used judiciously. If our hairbrushes are made in China, that's not a national security threat. If our telecommunications equipment that the military is using is made in China, that might be a very different question. So again, I will yield my last 10 seconds.
Look, we have, I think this is fear porn. I think all this makes for obtaining followers and conversations, and I got it. There's a lot of drama, and we no longer have soap operas to watch in the middle of the afternoon with beautiful women. But at the end of the day, crude oil has gone from $80 to sub 60. That has to be good for the U.S. consumer, okay? You want cheaper gasoline or not? Gasoline's come down. I don't see anything breaking here. In fact, what I do see is when you have a president that has a spine and they're making decisions in a cabinet, whether you like what they're doing or not, the markets are responding very aggressively. And I think that is really important here. Wow, the markets are really behaving as if there's many things that need to be fixed. I think we're moving into a world where we will manufacture everything because we can. The arbitrage of free labor, the arbitrage between third world nation labor cost and American labor cost, that is history. That is going away so rapidly. Like, I'm pretty sure in the next 18 months, customer service is not going to be a human being anywhere on planet Earth. Anywhere on planet Earth. I think India knows this, so they're going to dig deep into AI. We most certainly are long energy, which is coming down in price. Interesting. See, everybody thinks you're going to, I think people think this protectionism and intervention. Doctor, have you ever seen intervention without protectionism or protectionism without intervention? Never. Like, people should get out of the markets and let the markets work. Now, if you believe that, if you believe that markets actually are better than intervention, I'm going to say that we have not had a free market in at least 30 years. And that all the constructs, OPEC, NATO, all these agreements, these tariffs that were made 10 years ago, they're all going to come under review and probably break out. They're probably not going to survive the future, because the future is tomorrow morning, the future is showing up. And we're still living with a paradigm where the banks are still operating on Fortran. I mean, the government is still operating on Fortran. So we as a country have to decide, do we want to be a first world leading country, or do we want to be on the world stage and be taken advantage of? I most certainly think we have been taken advantage of. And so I like what we're doing here. I don't see it as intervention. I just see it as a table reset, right? And the guy's not doing anything. Look, he just paused. Now, I wouldn't take him for granted. He could unpause quite quickly, and I think that's the point of this.
Well, you should probably have called this a tag team instead of a debate, because I'm pretty much in agreement. I'm desperate to find something to disagree on. Maybe I'll put it this way. What does concern me about this is that, well, there are some people within the Trump administration, Peter Navarro, for example, who have said this is just a long-term program to keep high tariffs on. That's not good. That would be harmful for a number of reasons. But the other thing that does bother me is that kind of the shock therapy nature of this, that it is coming so fast, and I worry that it could trigger not a depression, but a recession. And a recession, Donald Trump has actually made kind of remarkable gains in popularity. I don't want to see that undermined, because he's doing very important things with respect to the Doge and with getting the administrative state under control. And I don't want to see that hurt in a recession. And that is one of the things that I worry about. So I'd be pretty careful about this. I like the suspension.
Over the years, there's been a lot of debate about the fluoride in water. Dentists claim it's perfectly safe and is really important for making our children's teeth healthier, which makes them healthier. But critics say that fluoride is actually a toxic chemical and is not good for children. Well, recently, an analysis of 59 studies of about 20,000 children found that those children that had an increased level of fluoride in their water had an average drop in IQ points of 6.75. That's a terrible discovery, and a recent court hearing found that the 0.7 milligrams per liter dose that's the average in most of our water is a toxic dose and is lowering the IQ in children. This has led to many counties across America banning fluoride in their water, and just recently the Utah governor banned fluoride from Utah's water. And now HHS Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. is signaling that he's going to tell the CDC must no longer recommend the fluoridation of water. This is a huge change in this conversation.
For over a decade, Hungary has led the Western Front in battling global population decline. And now they've actually reversed it. The secret? Bold, unapologetic policies, like zero income tax for mums with 2 or more kids, massive housing breaks, a full-scale push to rebuild the population without mass migration. Balázs Orbán is the right-hand man to Prime Minister Orbán, and he says this isn't Brussels' mission, it's Hungary's.
We in Hungary, we see that the demographic decline which is happening all over the developed part of the world is the biggest civilizational challenge what we're facing. And if we are not able to find a solution, that we all are going to be in a big trouble. So we at Hungary realized that we have to introduce the most comprehensive and multi-layered family policy what we can have, and the goal should be, if there are young people in the society who want to get married, and who want to have children, the state should provide an environment which helps them to achieve their goals. We, on the governmental side, should actively engage and help those people who want to get married and want to have children. This is why we introduced many measures, more than 30 measures since 2010. And I'm not saying we are done. I'm not saying we solved the problem, but I think it's obvious that things are working. So first of all, the fertility rate, which was the lowest in 2010 in Hungary, all among the European Union countries, now is the third largest. And all other countries, their fertility rates went down. And the second, the number of marriages since we introduced this comprehensive model doubled. The number of divorces almost halved. The number of abortions also halved. What we see is that since 2010, we have 200,000 extra babies who would not have been born if we don't have these family policies. 200,000 extra babies. Compared to the population of Hungary, that's a big number. That would be the second largest city in Hungary after the capital Budapest. This is what we achieved, but we realized that the last years been very hard for the families, not just in Hungary, but all over Europe, all over the Western world. We had the COVID crisis with all the lockdown, with all the financial burdens, and we had the Russian-Ukrainian war with all the financial burden, energy crisis, inflation, and so on. So these are not considered as very family-friendly things. So what we realized that we have to introduce new measures. And so start a pro-family policy second phase to get even better results than we got in the last 15 years. And I would consider three major elements. The first one, we have family tax benefit system, which is existing. If you are working and you have children under the age of 18, you get tax benefits. We double these tax benefits to counter inflation. That's number one. The second one, I think probably this is the biggest issue. We introduce zero personal income tax for women with two or more children.
Bevezetjük a 2 és 3 gyermekes édesanyák teljes, életük végéig tartó jövedelem-adó mentességét.
If you are under 25, you don't have to pay any personal income tax. If you are under 30 and you have 1 children, then you don't pay any personal income tax. And if you are more than 30, but you have 2 or 3 or 4 or more children, you don't have to pay any personal income tax for your entire life for women. And the third one is housing. So we think that if we want to have stable families and we want to encourage young couples and also parents to have as many babies as they want, then we have to subsidize somehow their housing. And we have a special loan program for this housing where we provide between $40,000 or $140,000 special loan for housing. Repayment can be suspended when the first child is arriving, and you get almost $30,000 debt relief per children if the second or the third children are coming. And there is another baby expecting subsidy, which is an interest-free general purpose loan. It's also around $30,000. And if you have 3 children, then you don't have to repay it at all. So this is a huge financial support for a young couple and a young family. And we put the major elements of these programs into our constitution. So it's constitutionally fixed. It's transparent, it's sustainable, it's understandable for everybody. And if the young couples are making decisions and making their own personal calculation, they can rely on these programs and in a long term, which is, I think, this kind of predictability is very important.
Now, many reporters and investigators in the United States are circling around the right topics, but even the best of these keep missing the central bombshell. Here on X, now in the year 2025, with the forces of censorship at last losing ground, at least back in the United States, we have a chance to seek the truth, to dig deeper, to see how we the people have been manipulated. And amid all these reports of FBI interventions against our freedom of speech, Hunter Biden's laptop, and war profiteering, it takes time for our eyes to adjust, to find the clearest lens that will crack the code. My work here in Ukraine these past 3 years has been to help we Americans find that lens to see the truth.
It's a war that would have never happened if I was president. Putin would have never, ever done it.
President Trump might be more right than even he realizes, because what's becoming clear is that Joe Biden was compromised.
As long as it takes.
Compromised by the very Russian interest he claimed to oppose. At this moment, Americans are rightly concerned about French courts barring Marine Le Pen from running for the French presidency. But here in Ukraine, something similar is happening, except the optics of corruption have blinded we Americans from seeing that reality. The Ukrainian people had their revolution in 2014. Just as Americans voted to reject their own elite political class last fall, Ukrainians chose to get rid of theirs in 2014. And now Russia, while trying to play the innocent victim, is working to erase that choice of the Ukrainian people, just like those courts in France. And it seems Russia has had help from Washington. Because if Ukraine wins outright, if Russia loses, then that compromise will surface. The deals, the phone calls, the corruption, the money exchange, all of it. Now, many reporters and investigators in the United States are circling around the right topics. They're diving into Hunter Biden, Burisma, and that laptop. But even the best of these keep missing the central bombshell that could reframe everything. They're missing the lens that can help us figure out the true optics of the situation. Last week, Catherine Herridge and Michael Schellenberger jointly reported that the FBI knew about the compromise on Hunter Biden's laptop before the 2020 election, and that the FBI actively tried to shut down any discussion of that laptop, including on what used to be known on Twitter, and which thankfully now is a haven of free speech, X. And it gets worse. Schellenberger, who's a professor at the University of Austin, reminds us that Senator Chuck Grassley said the FBI accused him of spreading Russian disinformation, when in fact, Senator Grassley's investigations revealed that Russia was a bad actor all along. Why would that be Russian disinformation? Grassley had released testimony that the CEO of a company called Burisma, Mykola Zlochevsky, had 17 audio recordings with Hunter Biden. And 2 of those recordings included Joe Biden himself. Zlochevsky admitted he was forced to pay the Bidens money. But here's the problem. Burisma is seen as a Ukrainian company, when in truth, that CEO, Mykola Zlochevsky, was a fugitive from Ukrainian justice with ties to Moscow. In fact, it was in Moscow, not in Kyiv, where Burisma's CEO met with Hunter Biden's business partner, Devon Archer, who was pardoned by Donald Trump just a couple weeks ago. Zlochevsky was part of the Kremlin elite, and he was furious that Ukraine would not bow to Russian control. Zlochevsky lost his power in 2014, and so he paid millions of dollars to the son of the sitting United States vice president. Is it any surprise that once Biden took office in 2021, that the countdown to Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine began? Joe Biden lifted sanctions on Nord Stream, he refused to send Ukraine the same lethal aid that Trump had approved, and then, when the tanks rolled in February of 2022, what was Joe Biden's response? Words at first, not action. No F-16s for years, no deep strikes permitted, no green light to hit the Russian missile launch points that attacked Ukrainian cities every day. It was a story of restrictions and delay. All the while, Joe Biden poured billions into the U.S. military-industrial complex, fattening defense contractors while making it seem like Ukraine was getting all these resources. It was a perfect storm. Ukraine got just enough to survive, a lot of also because of their own ingenuity, but not enough to win. And Americans only saw billions of dollars flowing somewhere, but they saw no victory and no victory plan. Meanwhile, for years, Joe Biden lectured Ukraine on corruption while his son was taking corrupt money from Moscow. And we have to ask, why was Joe Biden on those phone calls with Burisma's Moscow-based CEO? Why did Hunter Biden receive $3.5 million from the widow of Moscow's mayor? As one of my mentors, the late, great British journalist Sir Harold Evans, always told other journalists, keep digging, always dig deeper. And that's precisely what we need to do now. We need to keep digging, and we need to find better lenses to see the truth. Russia is good at sleight of hand. Even this week, Moscow escalated drone swarm attacks upon Ukrainian cities, with people in Kharkiv telling me it has not been this bad since 2022. And yet, all we hear about is publicly the Kremlin playing the victim, complaining about much more narrow and targeted Ukrainian attacks upon Russian energy infrastructure, even as Moscow is indiscriminately attacking Ukrainian cities and civilians every day. Maybe Russia was not just a tool to take down President Trump. Maybe it was a distraction, a cover-up to hide a whole bunch of corruption. Maybe it was an effort to stop the freest nation in Europe. And maybe, just maybe, those people whom we were told were working for Russia were actually the people who were coming closest to revealing who truly was working for Russia and other totalitarian forces around the world. This is Joe Lindsley reporting, as I have every day since 2022, from Ukraine.
I'm Justin Brady with the Iowa Podcast. Iowa, as you probably know, is the political epicenter of the country because of the Iowa caucuses. We had the local organizer for Hands Off Des Moines in the studio to discuss what her demands were, and they want Zachary Nunn, our local congressman, to have his hands off Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and they demand clean drinking water. But we reached out to his office, and here's the challenge. He already supports all the issues they stand for. Hands Off says, don't cut Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security benefits. He says, we're 100% committed to not doing that. Hands Off says, you haven't done town halls. He says he has. They want safe water. He says he introduced a bipartisan Safe Drinking Water for Disadvantaged Communities Act. Do we want a country where we constantly gaslight each other? We're no longer debating actual political issues. We're trading narratives on critical issues we already agree on, or at least that's what's on the surface. Is it because Republicans and Democrats fear substantive dialogue for deeper issues? I'm Justin Brady with the Iowa Podcast, and that is your 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Two giants, one unapologetic conversation. Glenn Beck and Eric Bolling dig into illegal immigration, social security fraud, and the left's meltdown over Elon Musk's backing of free speech and Trump.
Elon Musk and a couple of his partners of Doge found that millions of illegals have been on Social Security, at actual Social Security numbers. Take a listen to this.
When we saw these numbers, we were like, what is this? In 21, you see 270,000 people, goes all the way to 2.1 million in 24. These are non-citizens that are getting Social Security numbers.
Yeah, this is a mind-blowing chart.
Yeah, just this literally blew us away. Like, we went there to find fraud, and we found this by accident. And this isn't political, by the way. My parents are immigrants. Yeah, this country's been great to us. My brother and sister all born in Spain. I'm pro-legal immigration. This is not political. This is not political. This is about America and the future of America.
Man, Glenn, it is absolutely scary what they're finding, and the Democrats still are pushing back on all the things Doge. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't understand. I don't understand people who are pushing back on this stuff. I mean, how is this right in any way? You know, I heard somebody explain, well, they're actually, you know, these people are paying into Social Security, but they're not going to get any benefits. Well, first of all, I don't know if that's true. But second of all, wait a minute. So you're then, because you're ripping one of us off then. You're either ripping us off or you're ripping off the people that are here illegally and you're making them pay into a system that they're never going to get. I mean, it's wrong either way you look at it. And I don't understand this world where we pick sides based on who the first one is to say it. You know what I mean? Did Donald Trump say it or did Joe Biden say it? Well, because I got to know, because that way I know which side I'm on. No, there are guiding principles. I don't get this world that the Democrats are living in, where they're just against whatever Donald Trump is for or anything that Elon Musk is doing, when it's a lot of the stuff that they championed.
If Trump came out and said, I love oxygen, and Elon Musk says, we're going to look for all the waste of oxygen, Democrats would be like, no, we're against oxygen. We hate we don't want any part of oxygen.
It's true.
It's a literal derangement syndrome. And now it's just two of them. There's Tesla derangement syndrome and Trump derangement syndrome. I'm not sure which one is worse.
The Tesla stuff is now making them not just mere spectators. It's taking people and putting them into situations to where they're actual terrorists now. You set a car on fire, you try to torch a Tesla dealership. That's terrorism. Mm-hmm. You're trying to move politics, make a political point, and move people in your direction by using fear and intimidation. That's the definition of terrorism. And people don't see it that way, and they need to start seeing that way. And I'd like to know, when is Pam Bondi going to show up? When is she going to show up to work? And when are we going to start seeing people in handcuffs being made examples of? This is wrong. And it would be wrong if, I wasn't a big fan of Elon Musk when all he was talking about was the planet. We got to get off the planet, because we're all going to be dead by 2030. I don't agree with him on that, but I never was against him. I don't understand why all of a sudden you can be for the guy who did more for the planet and your cause than any other human alive. But once and it's not even Donald Trump, once he backs free speech, once he says everyone should be allowed to have their opinion, you go bat crap crazy.
Well, Glenn, give them credit, these lunatics on the left who are going bat crap crazy, because they didn't exactly do it as soon as he was for free speech. They kind of got wary of him, and they realized MAGA was forced free speech, and they jumped in. But when Elon Musk, after Trump was almost assassinated, Elon Musk jumped on board, started helping Trump, win an election. That's when they went exactly what you're saying. Bad crap crazy, reversing the hypocrisy is so rich here, reversing everything they loved about him and Tesla's, decades into like we had him now.
We're watching half our nation go through some psychosis, some really deep mental issue that I don't know how to reach yet.
Watch this. Watch this. Play that soundbite of the Tesla, I guess they call it protest. And there's another one where a bunch of dudes are wearing Teslas that are on fire costumes. I mean, it's crazy. They've lost their mind.
I got to go back and look into history. When was the last time, if ever, you had people protesting in the streets globally? You had people all over the world protesting something that somebody in America was doing. Now, not nuclear weapons, not calling for war, not even the tariffs. They're not even protesting the tariffs. But somehow or another, you're getting people in Sweden and Germany and Ireland to come out and protest against Elon Musk for some bureaucratic stuff that is never going to affect them at all because it's just about the American budget. How has that happened? There's no way that's grassroots. That's never, ever happened before. These people are useful idiots. That's all it is. They have no idea how they are being used. For what?
I'm Eric Bolling for 69 Minutes.
In the wake of SignalGate, the Defense Department Office of Inspector General has announced that it will conduct an evaluation into DoD officials' use of Signal, the messaging app. Here's what the American public needs to know. First, DoD OIG is exactly the right organization to conduct this type of review. OIGs are built for this. They're independent and they don't have a dog in the fight, and that means the American people can trust their findings. Next, the most important factor to determine the success or failure of this review is one thing: whether the OIG will have unfettered access to all materials, documents, and witnesses. Now, that's the normal course of business for OIGs doing oversight, but the Defense Secretary has special authority to restrict or prohibit the OIG's reviews if he determines that it's in the national security interest. So here's the key question for the American people. Will Secretary Hegseth invoke that special authority? Will the OIG have access to all relevant documents and materials? Will witnesses come forward without fear of retaliation? Will the OIG be able to issue its findings without fear of retaliation from the White House or the Pentagon? Those are the key questions for the American people. This is Mark Lee Greenblatt. That's 69 seconds for 69 minutes.
Is AI crossing a line from tool to threat? Dr. Danish sits down with AI ethicist Wendell Wallach to break it down. Are we already in the uncanny valley where machines seem human enough to unsettle, but not quite enough to trust? What happens when morals, meaning, and jobs get replaced by code? This isn't hype, it's about humanity. Tune in to Uncanny Valley Friday at 4:20 p.m. ET, only on X.
You've been talking about how this could slip beyond our control. You've been talking about safety challenges around AI before it was cool.
Way before it was cool. I mean, I go back to before these technologies existed. And when I first got involved in all of this, half the people in the world who could care about it were transhumanists. And their main concern was whether we were talking about AI or nanotech or neuroscience, that government didn't get in their way of enhancing themselves through these technologies. But they were also overly optimistic. They thought everything was going to show up within a decade. I would say, my involvement with them goes back to 2001. And for most of that time, ethics, at least in terms of sharpening our awareness of what the real issues are and what kinds of policies or choices we need to make, that's really been a back burner issue until recently. And even recently, we can argue about whether it's just kind of a coding on activities that really couldn't care less about ethics, or whether ethics has suddenly become a serious area. But I'm even sometimes referred to as at least one of the godfathers of AI ethics. So my interests go way beyond AI because of an earlier book I wrote called Moral Machines Teaching Robots Right from Wrong. And that book was written with Colin Allen. And for many people, they look at that and say that's the first book that sort of brought together all these little thoughts and tried to bring some structure to thinking about ethics for robots and artificial intelligence, whether they could be sensitive to morally significant situations, and if so, whether they could respond in appropriate ways.
What are the underlying issues between machines and morality?
So socio-technical systems just means you have humans and technology in the system itself. We're really moving on these two different fronts. And the problem from the very beginning has been that they get entangled with each other. And it's not that there won't be ambiguities about when the machine is autonomous and when it isn't, but that entanglement has created a real problem in talking about many of the near-term ethical considerations, those that are already here, those that are already affecting our lives, because some people have always just wanted to talk about ASI, artificial, really a singularity that was far superior to human intelligence. And their main ethical concern, and this came largely out of the AI researchers themselves, because they didn't want to be held responsible for having ended humans' reign on the planet. Their biggest concern was whether we can have an on-off switch or how we can ensure that artificial and superintelligence will act in a way that is beneficent for humans. And the problem with that has been is we keep trying to address problems about a future that we don't even quite know what it will look like or on what technological platform it will be built. And we don't deal with the near-term issues, and therefore we sort of keep the door open for all kinds of slipshod work and unsafe work because we don't address what's on the table today.
But I just think about it, and I think about how quickly the iPhone has affected our lives. And now we're seeing AI, and it's like, it's come into the average consumer's day-to-day life in I know this is AI way in maybe 5 years, in the last 5 years. I just think about what the world will look like 15 years from now, and how the hell am I supposed to prepare?
So there was deep insecurity in my lifetime. We were the generation that was taught to hide under our desks in case of a nuclear attack, so, which was absurd. But the point is, generation after generation has gone through fear of whether they will have a future and questions about, well, what should they be doing in the meantime if the future suddenly disappears? So let's not lose sight of the kinds of insecurity that have always been there. The fact that new technologies have always seemed to be a threat. So I think large language models have made us aware that the breadth of what artificial intelligence can do has suddenly gotten unbelievably wide. And yet I still happen to think that we're going to get 80% of the way to general intelligence, but that last 20% is going to be a bear.
Now it's time for my take. They say a week is a long time in politics, and ain't that the truth? Last episode, Trump's tariffs had just dropped. Chaos had ensued. World leaders and plenty of pundits in America too were panicking, and loudly. Fast forward to now, and as predicted right here just 7 days ago, for the most part, all is well again in the world, with the exception, of course, of China. The nation that retaliated now finds itself in an unenviable position. Massive tariffs and a war of words, I suspect they won't win. Now, I, for one, am ecstatic that this has occurred, for a few reasons, but one in particular. It has placed the Chinese Communist Party and the rising/existing threat it poses firmly back where it belongs, in the spotlight. The sleeping giant thrives under the radar. And with war in Europe and the Middle East, it's fair to say most have taken their eye off the greatest danger facing Western civilization in a very long time. Under President Xi Jinping, China has built a military that many believe would outgun the US now if war were to break out. Trump promised to restore America as the superpower it once was, and this is all part of fulfilling that promise. It may not always be obvious to those not particularly engaged in the geopolitical goings-on around the world, but there's a reason you are allowed not to care overly much. It's a privilege afforded to those who live in countries which are democratic, free and prosperous. But we must never forget why. The blood of many brave men and women was spilled for this blessed existence. So any measures taken, like what we've seen from the Trump administration this week, to try and claw back some power, isn't about petty politics or the American president's ego, as healthy as it might be. It's about ensuring another generation doesn't have to die to protect what we enjoy right now. It's to avoid all-out war. So yes, there is global uncertainty regarding tariffs, and plenty are nervous. But if this reset goes some way to levelling out the playing field when it comes to China, not just from an economic perspective, but militarily, then this is a win. And regardless of what happens next, it's a clear message to our biggest adversary that there's a new chief in town, and the days of weakness and submission are over. That's it for 69X Minutes, presented by Mario Nafal. I'm Erin Molan. Thanks so much for joining us. No spin, no censorship, just the truth. We'll see you next Sunday.